The distress beacon pierced through the void of space like a dying star's last gasp. Ambassador Keyleth of the Voxari Coalition pressed her three-fingered hand against the cool glass of the observation deck, watching her homeworld Voxen Prime burn in the distance. Orange flames licked across the southern continent where the Krath invasion forces had landed, just 18 hours ago. The screams over the civilian channels had stopped 3 hours back. That meant either the evacuation shelters had held, or there was nobody left to scream. Still no response from the Galactic Council? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her aide, a younger Voxari named Telman, shook his head. His skin had gone pale, almost translucent with fear. Nothing, Ambassador. The Zendari said they need to consult their elders. The Pluthari claimed it violates their trade agreements with the Krath Empire. The Yithrin just disconnected. Telman's mandibles clicked nervously. We are alone. Keyleth closed her 4 eyes and felt the weight of 6 billion souls pressing down on her shoulders. 6 billion people who had trusted the Coalition to keep them safe. 6 billion lives that now hung by a thread while the great powers of the galaxy debated profit margins and political convenience. The Krath were merciless. They did not take prisoners for labor. They did not negotiate terms. They consumed worlds, strip mining them of resources and leaving behind nothing but ash and bones. The bridge officer's voice crackled over the intercom. Ambassador, we are receiving a response to the distress beacon. It is not from any known Galactic Council member. Keyleth's heart skipped. Put it through. Static filled the observation deck, then a voice emerged. It was strange, speaking in perfectly accented Galactic Standard but with an odd rhythm to it. This is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth Expeditionary Force, responding to your distress call. We are currently 72 light-years from your position. What is the nature of your emergency? Earth. The name sent a ripple of confused murmurs through the crew. Everyone had heard the rumors about the newcomers from the far spiral arm. They were young, practically primitives who had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. They had no representatives on the council, no trade agreements, no military alliances. Most species considered them curiosities at best, potential nuisances at worst. This is Ambassador Keyleth of the Voxari Coalition. We are under full-scale invasion by the Krath Empire. Our military has fallen. Our cities are burning. We have 6 billion civilians with nowhere to go and no one willing to help. Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. We are asking for refugee assistance. Anything you can provide, please. There was a pause that stretched for an eternity. Keyleth imagined the human commander weighing the risks, calculating whether it was worth involving her species in a war that had nothing to do with them. Why would they help? The Voxari had never traded with Earth, never offered them a seat at any diplomatic table. They were strangers. Ambassador Keyleth, Captain Santos's voice returned, but there was something different in her tone, something hard. 72 light-years is a 4-day journey for our fleet. We are mobilizing now. Hold your position and transmit all planetary defense codes and orbital coordinates. Help is coming. Captain, you misunderstand, Keyleth said quickly. We are not asking for military intervention. We need evacuation ships, refuge for our people. We cannot ask you to fight our war. Another pause. When Captain Santos spoke again, there was something in her voice that made Keyleth's spines tingle. It was not anger. It was colder than that. It was purpose. Ambassador, humanity learned a long time ago that there is no such thing as someone else's war when innocent people are dying. We will see you in 4 days. Santos out. The communication ended. Keyleth stood frozen, staring at the speakers as if they might offer more explanation. Telman moved beside her, his voice trembling with hope and confusion. Ambassador, what does that mean? Are they sending refugee ships? Keyleth did not know. She had asked for sanctuary, for ships to carry her people to safety. But the human captain had spoken like someone preparing for battle, not rescue. What could a young species like humanity possibly do against the Krath Empire? The Krath had conquered 47 star systems in the last century alone. Their battle cruisers were the size of moons, their soldiers bred for nothing but war. On the surface of Voxen Prime, the fires spread. The Krath ground forces advanced methodically, crushing every pocket of resistance with overwhelming firepower. Keyleth watched through the long-range scanners as another city went dark. She thought about the children in the underground shelters huddled in the darkness, wondering if anyone was coming to save them. 4 days. The humans had said 4 days. The Krath would control the entire planet in 3. Keyleth turned away from the window and walked toward the bridge. If these humans were truly coming, she needed to prepare. She needed to gather every ship in the refugee fleet, establish secure channels, and coordinate evacuation zones. But doubt gnawed at her. What could Earth possibly send that would make a difference? In the command center, she pulled up what little information the Coalition had on humanity. They were a fractious species, only recently unified under a single planetary government. Their technology was generations behind the Council races. Their military was small and untested against real threats. They had encountered a few minor skirmishes with pirates and claim jumpers, but nothing like the Krath. Yet Captain Santos had spoken with absolute certainty. "We are mobilizing now," she had said. Mobilizing what? Keyleth downloaded the coordinates of every civilian shelter, every underground bunker, every refugee camp that still had power. If the humans were coming, they would need targeting data. She transmitted everything to the last known location of the human ship, along with casualty reports and Krath force projections. The hours crawled by. On the surface, the Krath continued their advance. Keyleth stopped counting the cities that fell. She stopped listening to the desperate pleas on the civilian channels. All she could do was wait and pray to the old gods that she had not just sent 6 billion people to their graves by trusting in the word of a species no one truly knew. On the 4th day, the sensors lit up. Not with one ship, not with a refugee fleet, with an armada. The sensor officer's hands shook as he read the numbers. "Ambassador, I am detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures emerging from jump space, counting 300 distinct vessels. They are still coming." Keyleth rushed to the display screen, her 4 eyes widening as the tactical map filled with blue markers representing the incoming human fleet. 300 ships. For a species barely explored beyond their own solar neighborhood, it was an impossible number. The entire Voxari defense fleet at its peak had numbered only 80 vessels. "Classification?" she demanded. The sensor officer worked frantically at his console. "I'm seeing multiple ship types. Large troop transports, cargo haulers, smaller escort craft, and—" He paused, his skin color shifting to a shocked purple. "Ambassador, I'm reading 17 capital-class warships. They are massive. Some are over 2 kilometers in length." Before Keyleth could respond, her communications panel lit up. Captain Santos's voice came through, calm and professional. "Ambassador Keyleth, this is Captain Santos aboard the UEFS Indomitable. We are establishing orbital superiority and preparing landing zones. Please transmit coordinates for all civilian population centers that require immediate evacuation." Keyleth found her voice. "Captain Santos, we requested refugee assistance." "What is this fleet?" There was a sound that might have been a dry laugh. "Ambassador, you asked humanity for help. We do not do anything halfway. I have construction engineers, medical personnel, supply logistics teams, and yes, enough firepower to make the Krath think twice about their life choices. Now those coordinates, please." Keyleth transmitted the data with trembling hands. Within minutes, the human fleet began moving with precision that surprised every Voxari officer on the bridge. The warships took up defensive positions around the planet, their weapon systems coming online with power readings that made the sensors scream in protest. The transport ships began descending toward the surface in organized waves. "What are they doing?" Talman whispered. "Those transports are heading directly into active combat zones." Keyleth could only watch as the humans did the impossible. Their landing craft punched through the atmosphere under heavy Krath fire, their shields absorbing impacts that would have vaporized Voxari vessels. But they did not return fire, not yet. They were heading for the refugee camps, on the ground, in a shelter beneath the ruins of the city of Calthera. A young Voxari teacher named Oren held 32 children in her arms as the ceiling shook from explosions above. The Krath were less than a kilometer away. She could hear their war machines grinding through the streets, crushing everything in their path. The children whimpered in the darkness, too frightened even to cry properly. Then the ground shook differently. It was not the impact of weapons, but the rumble of engines, heavy engines. Oren heard sounds she did not recognize, sharp cracks followed by deeper booms. The Krath weapons fire suddenly became sporadic, then stopped altogether. A voice came over the shelter's emergency speaker, speaking in Galactic Standard with that same odd accent. "This is Sergeant Marcus Cole of the Earth Expeditionary Force. We are entering your shelter now. Do not be alarmed. We are here to get you out." The shelter door, which had been sealed and reinforced, suddenly groaned and moved. Oren watched in amazement as it was pulled open from the outside by soldiers in armor, unlike anything she had ever seen. They were bipedal like Voxari, but shorter and broader. Their armor was dark gray with glowing blue highlights, and they moved with practiced efficiency. The first soldier through the door removed his helmet, revealing a brown-skinned face with kind eyes. "Ma'am, I am Sergeant Cole. How many do you have down here?" 32 children, 3 elderly, and myself," Oren managed to say. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. Sergeant Cole nodded and spoke into his communication device. "Command, this is Baker Team. We have 36 civilians, including minors. Requesting immediate dust-off at Extraction Point Delta." He turned back to Oren. "We are going to get you and these kids somewhere safe, but we need to move fast. Can you help keep them calm?" Oren nodded numbly. The human soldiers spread through the shelter, some taking up defensive positions at the entrance while others began gently helping the children to their feet. They carried emergency rations, water, and medical supplies. One soldier, a woman with red hair, knelt beside an elderly Voxari male who had stopped responding hours ago. She checked his vitals with a handheld device and immediately began administering aid. "He is dehydrated and in shock, but he will make it," she said in accented Voxari, surprising everyone. "I have got him stabilized." Outside, Oren could hear the sounds of battle. Heavy weapons fire, explosions, and something else. Something that sounded like jets screaming across the sky. Sergeant Cole saw her expression and offered a grim smile. "That is our close air support. The Krath made the mistake of trying to prevent our landing. They are learning that was a bad idea." A massive transport ship settled into the rubble-strewn plaza outside the shelter, its landing struts crushing a destroyed Krath tank beneath its weight. The rear ramp lowered and more human soldiers emerged, forming a protective corridor. Sergeant Cole gestured to Oren and the children. "Time to go, ma'am. Stay between my people and you will be fine." Oren gathered the children and led them out of the shelter they had called home for 3 days of horror. The moment she stepped outside, she understood what Sergeant Cole had meant about close air support. The sky was filled with human aircraft, sleek fighters that moved faster than her eyes could track. They were engaging Krath gunships, and the Krath were losing. A Krath battlewalker, 15 meters tall and bristling with weapons, appeared around a corner 2 blocks away. It turned toward the evacuation site, its main cannon beginning to charge. Before Oren could scream, one of the human aircraft dove from the sky, released 2 missiles, and pulled up in a maneuver that seemed to defy physics. The missiles struck the battlewalker dead center, and it exploded in a fireball that lit up the entire street. "Keep moving," Sergeant Cole said calmly, as if giant war machines exploded in front of him every day. Perhaps they did. Oren and the children were ushered into the transport ship. Inside, the cargo bay had been converted into an emergency medical center and refugee processing area. Human personnel in blue uniforms were treating wounded Voxari, while others distributed food and water. A human woman with gray hair and gentle eyes approached Oren. "Hello, I am Dr. Elizabeth Chen. You are safe now. Let me check you and the children for injuries." Safe, the word felt alien. Oren had not felt safe since the Krath invaded. But looking around at these strange humans who had crossed the galaxy to pull her people from the fire, she found herself believing it. They had not asked for payment. They had not demanded treaties or concessions. They had simply come. The transport lifted off smoothly, rising above the burning city. Through the window, Oren could see the battle continuing below. Human forces were not just evacuating civilians. They were pushing the Krath back, establishing defensive perimeters around every refugee site. For the first time in 4 days, the Krath advance had stopped. In orbit, Ambassador Keyleth watched the tactical display with mounting disbelief. The humans had landed forces at every major population center simultaneously. Their warships had engaged the Krath orbital platforms and were winning. But more importantly, their transport ships were filling with refugees and ferrying them to massive hospital ships that had taken up position at the edge of the system. Captain Santos's voice came through again. "Ambassador, we are establishing field hospitals at coordinates I am transmitting now. We have also deployed engineering teams to begin repairing your planetary defense grid. We will have your shields back online within 12 hours. "Captain," Keyleth said, her voice thick with emotion she did not bother to hide. "Why are you doing this?" There was a long pause. When Captain Santos answered, her voice was quiet but firm. "Because it is the right thing to do, Ambassador. Because we remember what it was like to be alone and afraid. Because someone has to stand up to bullies or they just keep taking. And because those are children down there who deserve a chance to grow up. That is reason enough." The Krath War Commander Thexlar watched the tactical display with growing confusion that slowly turned to rage. His invasion force, which had swept through 47 worlds over the past century, was being stalled by a species he had never heard of. The humans had appeared from nowhere and were systematically dismantling his carefully planned operation. "Explain to me," he growled to his tactical officer, "how a primitive species with outdated technology is holding back our advance." The tactical officer, a veteran of 30 campaigns, hesitated before answering. "Commander, their technology is not outdated. Our intelligence was wrong, very wrong. Their kinetic weapons strike with force levels comparable to our plasma cannons. Their fighters move with acceleration that should kill their pilots, yet they continue operating, and their shields regenerate faster than we can damage them." Thexlar slammed his armored fist against the console. "Then concentrate our forces. Overwhelming firepower has always been our advantage. Gather the Southern Battle Group and crush their largest ground position." The orders went out. 3,000 Krath soldiers, supported by 50 battle walkers and atmospheric gunships, began advancing on the human defensive line protecting the city of Talvex. It was home to 2 million Voxari civilians, and the humans had established their primary evacuation center there. If the Krath could break through, they could turn the tide of the entire battle. Colonel James Park stood on the roof of what had once been a government building, now converted into a command post. He watched the Krath forces gathering on the horizon through his enhanced visor. The numbers were not good. His regiment of 800 soldiers was outnumbered nearly 4-1, and they had limited heavy armor support. "Sir, should we request additional forces from the fleet?" his executive officer asked. Colonel Park shook his head. "The fleet is stretched thin, covering all the evacuation sites. We hold here with what we have. Make sure every soldier knows the situation. Behind us are 2 million civilians who cannot run, cannot fight, and are counting on us to buy them time to get off this planet." He activated the regimental channel. "All units, this is Warhorse 6, you see what is coming. I am not going to lie to you and tell you this will be easy. The Krath think they can roll over us like they have rolled over everyone else. They think we are soft. They think we will break. Let us show them what happens when humans decide to make a stand." The Krath advance began with the artillery barrage that lit up the sky. Shells rained down on the human positions, exploding with devastating force. But the humans had prepared well. Defensive bunkers, reinforced buildings, and portable shield generators absorbed the assault. When the barrage lifted, the Krath ground forces began their charge. They moved like a gray tide across the blasted landscape, their battle walkers striding at the front, weapons blazing. The human forces held their fire until the enemy was within optimal range. Then Colonel Park gave a single word: fire. The battlefield erupted. Human railguns firing hypervelocity projectiles tore through Krath armor like paper. Missile batteries unleashed swarms of smart munitions that twisted and turned through the air, finding targets with terrifying accuracy. The Krath advance staggered as dozens of battle walkers exploded or toppled, their legs severed by precision strikes. But the Krath were veterans of 100 battles. They adapted quickly, spreading out and using cover. Their soldiers rushed forward in waves, accepting heavy casualties to close the distance. Within minutes, the battle became a brutal close-quarters fight as Krath shock troops reached the human defensive lines. Private First Class Sarah Mitchell found herself face-to-face with a Krath soldier twice her size. The creature was a nightmare made flesh, all armored scales and razor-sharp claws. It lunged at her with speed that would have killed a Voxari soldier before they could react. But Sarah had trained for 18 months specifically for combat against larger, stronger opponents. She dropped low, rolled to the side, and came up firing. Her rifle shot stitched a line across the Krath's exposed neck joint. The creature fell, and Sarah was already moving to the next target. All along the line, similar scenes played out. The humans were smaller than the Krath, but they were faster, better trained, and fought with a ferocity that shocked the invaders. When Krath soldiers expected opponents to break under pressure, they found humans who stood their ground and traded blow for blow. When the Krath tried to overwhelm positions with numbers, human soldiers called down precision artillery strikes danger. close to their own positions, trusting their armor and shields to protect them. In the sky above, the aerial battle was equally intense. Krath gunships attempted to provide close air support to their ground forces, but they were intercepted by human fighters that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Lieutenant Rafael Torres pulled his fighter through a barrel roll that would have torn apart a Krath pilot, locked onto an enemy gunship, and fired. The missile struck true and the gunship spiraled into the ground. "Raptor 3, you have 2 bandits on your 6, his wingman called out. "Copy that. Executing evasion pattern Delta." Rafael threw his fighter into a dive, pulled up hard, and spun. The pursuing Krath fighters tried to follow, but could not match the maneuver. They overshot, and Rafael's wingman destroyed both with a single burst of cannon fire. The Krath had never faced an enemy that could match them in the air. They had always enjoyed total air superiority. Now they were the ones being hunted. On the ground, the battle raged for 3 hours. The Krath threw everything they had at the human positions, and for a time, it looked like they might break through. Colonel Park was forced to commit his last reserves, sending them into a breach in the defensive line where Krath battle walkers had punched through. Lieutenant Maria Santos, no relation to Captain Santos but equally determined, led her platoon into the breach. They found themselves facing 2 intact battle walkers and over 100 Krath soldiers. The odds were impossible. Maria smiled. "Heavy weapons team, target those walkers. Everyone else on me. We are going to give them something to think about." Her soldiers fixed bayonets to their rifles, an ancient practice that many alien species had abandoned centuries ago. But humans remembered that sometimes wars were won not by superior technology, but by the willingness to look death in the eyes and charge anyway. They ran forward with a battle cry that had echoed across 1,000 human battlefields throughout history. The Krath soldiers hesitated. It was the first time in the entire battle they had hesitated. These small creatures were supposed to be weak, supposed to be easy prey, but they were running toward certain death as if it were a parade ground. That moment of hesitation was all the human heavy weapons team needed. 2 precisely placed anti-armor missiles destroyed both battle walkers. The Krath soldiers recovered and opened fire, but the humans were already among them. It became a melee, brutal and desperate. Maria emptied her rifle into a Krath soldier, then used it as a club when another rushed her. She took a slash across her arm that cut deep, but her armor's medical systems immediately injected pain suppressors and clotting agents. She kept fighting. Her platoon held the breach. They held it while wounded soldiers dragged themselves back to cover to be treated, and then returned to the line. They held it while ammunition ran low, and they resorted to captured Krath weapons. They held it because behind them were civilians who depended on them, and because retreat was not in their vocabulary. Finally, after 3 hours of continuous combat, the Krath advance broke. The survivors began falling back in disorder, their morale shattered. They had lost over 60% of their force, including all their heavy armor. The humans had taken casualties too, but nowhere near as severe. The defensive line had held. Colonel Park surveyed the battlefield from his command post. Bodies from both sides littered the ground. Several buildings were burning. But in the distance, he could see the evacuation transport still lifting off, still carrying civilians to safety. The cost had been high, but they had bought the time needed. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Krath commander," his communications officer said. Park was surprised. The Krath never communicated with their enemies except to demand surrender. He accepted the transmission. The face of War Commander Thexler appeared on his screen, and Park could see something he had never expected to see in a Krath's eyes. "Respect. Human Commander," Thexler said slowly. "I have fought across half the galaxy. I have broken armies 3 times your size, but I have never fought soldiers who refuse to yield even when death is certain. You have earned a warrior's respect today." Park kept his expression neutral. "If you respected us, you would not have invaded a peaceful world. You would not have attacked civilians. You and we are what we are," Thexlar replied. "But know this. I will recommend to the Empire that humanity be marked as a threat-level species. You will not be bothered again. We did not come here to earn your respect or your fear," Park said coldly. "We came here to help people you were trying to kill, and we will do it again every single time. Tell your Empire that." He cut the transmission and turned back to his officers. "Get me casualty reports and ammunition status. The battle might be over, but we still have work to do." While the soldiers fought to protect evacuation sites, Another group of humans was engaged in a different kind of battle. Chief Engineer Michael Chen stood in what remained of Voxen Prime's Planetary Defense Control Center, surrounded by sparking consoles and damaged equipment. His team of 50 engineers had been given an impossible task: restore the planetary shield generators that the Krath had destroyed in their initial assault. "The primary coupling is completely melted," said Engineer Rachel Kim, crawling out from beneath a massive console. Her face was streaked with grease and burn marks. "And the secondary power relay looks like someone used it for target practice, which they probably did." Michael nodded, pulling up a holographic schematic of the shield network. The Voxari had built their defense grid using technology similar to Council standard, but with unique modifications that made simple repairs impossible. They needed to understand not just how to fix it, but how it had been designed in the first place. "Wake up, Dr. Velth," Michael said to one of his team. "We need the original designer." 10 minutes later, an elderly Voxari engineer named Velth shuffled into the control room supported by a human medic. He had been injured during the initial Krath bombardment and had spent the last 4 days in a medical shelter. His 4 eyes went wide when he saw humans crawling through his life's work. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice weak but alarmed. "That system took me 40 years to design. You cannot just improvise repairs." Michael turned to him with a tired smile. "Dr. Velth, I am very glad you are here. We have been trying to figure out your genius for the last 6 hours. Can you help us?" Velth moved closer, looking at the holographic display. His expression changed from alarm to confusion. "You have already repaired the tertiary power grid. That should have taken weeks. And you have rerouted the capacitor network through auxiliary channels I did not even know existed." "We are pretty good at working with what we have," Rachel said, emerging from beneath another console. "But we hit a wall with the primary emitter array. We cannot get it to synchronize with the restored power grid." Velth studied the problem, his engineer's mind overcoming his injuries. "The synchronization requires a quantum-level calibration that can only be done with specialized equipment that was destroyed in the bombardment. Or," Michael said slowly, "we could bypass the quantum calibration entirely by introducing a buffer system that handles the phase variance in real time. It would not be as efficient as your original design, but it would work." Velth stared at him. "That is not possible. The phase variance would tear apart any known buffer material within seconds." Michael grinned and pulled out a small metallic cylinder. "Good thing we brought our own materials. This is a carbon nanotube composite with a dynamic lattice structure. We use it in our own shield systems. It can handle the phase variance." For the next 6 hours, Voxari and human engineers worked side by side. Velth found himself constantly surprised by the humans' approach to problem solving. Where Voxari engineering emphasized perfection and long-term planning, human engineering seemed to embrace improvisation and creative shortcuts. They welded where they should have bonded, rerouted where they should have replaced, and somehow made it all work. "Your species builds things expecting them to break," Velth observed as he watched Rachel jury-rig a power coupling using parts from 3 different systems. "We build things expecting to fix them," Rachel corrected. "There is a difference. Nothing is ever perfect, so we learn to adapt." By the 12th hour, the planetary shield grid hummed back to life. It was not operating at 100% capacity, closer to 70%, but it was enough. The shields shimmered into existence high above the planet, providing protection that had been absent for 4 days. In orbit, Ambassador Keyleth watched the energy readings climb and felt tears running down her face. Elsewhere on the planet, another kind of construction was underway. Major General Susan Martinez stood in a massive empty plane outside the ruined city of Corvin, watching as heavy construction vehicles carved out the foundations for what would become a temporary refugee city. The Voxari had millions of displaced civilians, and they needed shelter, food, water, and medical care immediately. "How long until the first modules are ready?" she asked her chief of staff. "First residential modules will be completed in 8 hours," he replied, checking his datapad. "We have 3,000 prefabricated units in our construction ships. Each one can house 50 people comfortably. Water purification systems are already online, and the medical tents are processing patients now." Susan nodded with satisfaction. The military was trained for disaster relief as much as for combat. Humanity had learned through painful experience that winning battles meant nothing if you could not care for the people left behind. Every soldier in the expeditionary force had cross-training in construction, medicine, or logistics. A young Voxari official named Maris approached hesitantly. She had been assigned as a liaison between the human forces and the surviving Voxari government. General Martinez, I have been asked to inquire about payment for these services. Our government treasury was destroyed, but we can negotiate resource rights or future trade agreements. Susan looked at her with genuine confusion. Payment? Ms. Maris, we did not come here for payment. But surely your government expects something in return for this massive expenditure of resources and lives. Our government expects us to do our jobs, Susan said firmly. And our job is to help people who need help. When your people are back on their feet, when your cities are rebuilt and your children are safe, then maybe we can talk about trade agreements. But that is for diplomats and politicians to figure out. I am just here to build shelter and keep people alive. Maris felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. The Galactic Council operated on transactions. Every favor had a price. Every alliance had conditions. But these humans seemed to operate on different principles entirely. It was unsettling and strangely hopeful at the same time. The construction proceeded at a pace that amazed every Voxari who witnessed it. Human workers labored in shifts around the clock. Massive vehicles that could reshape landscapes worked in coordinated teams directed by AI systems that planned every detail. Within 3 days, a city that could house 500,000 people rose from the empty plain. It was not beautiful. The buildings were simple, prefabricated structures, all in the same gray color with minimal decoration. But they were warm, weatherproof, and safe. Each residential unit had power, water, basic furniture, and climate control. The central areas had schools, medical facilities, food distribution centers, and community spaces. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who had been treating refugees since the first evacuation, walked through the new city with a Voxari doctor named Corin. They were inspecting the medical facilities, which had been set up with equipment that made Corin's eyes widen. This diagnostic scanner is more advanced than anything our hospitals had, he said, running his hands over the device. And you have dozens of them, just for a temporary camp. Every person deserves access to quality medical care, Elizabeth replied. Temporary does not mean inadequate. These people have been through trauma. The least we can do is ensure they are healthy. They moved through the pediatric ward, where human and Voxari medical staff worked together to care for children who had been injured or traumatized during the invasion. Elizabeth watched a human nurse carefully bandaging a young Voxari's arm while singing a soft lullaby. The child, who had been crying, slowly calmed down. Your people are so gentle with them, Corin observed. I expected soldiers to be harsh. Elizabeth smiled. Our soldiers are trained to protect. That includes protecting children from fear when we can. Many of them are parents themselves. They look at these kids and see their own children. In one corner of the ward, Lieutenant Maria Santos sat reading to a group of Voxari children. Her arm was still bandaged from the battle at Talvex, but she had refused to stay in the medical bay. The children were fascinated by the human stories she read, tales of adventure and heroes who fought for what was right. One child, a small female named Lyra, tugged on Maria's sleeve. Lieutenant Maria, why did you come to help us? We are not your people. Maria set down the book and looked at the child seriously. Lyra, there is something humans believe very strongly. We believe that when someone needs help and you can help them, you have a responsibility to do so, not because of what they can give you in return, but because it is the right thing to do. You and all these children are part of the galaxy we live in. That makes you our people too. Lyra thought about this, her young mind working through the concept. But your soldiers died fighting for us. I heard the adults talking. Why would they die for strangers? It was a hard question, one that Maria had wrestled with herself during the dark hours after the battle. She thought about the friends she had lost, good soldiers who would never see their families again. Because they believed your life was worth protecting, Maria said quietly. And because they believed that if we do not stand up for others, then no one will stand up for us when we need it. We build the world we want to live in through our actions. Lyra nodded slowly, not fully understanding but sensing the importance of the words. She leaned against Maria's side and Maria wrapped her good arm around the child. Across the refugee city, similar scenes played out. Human personnel did not just provide services. They integrated themselves into the community. They learned Voxari customs, tried to speak the language, and treated every refugee with dignity and respect. When Voxari elders expressed concern about maintaining their cultural traditions in the temporary housing, human cultural liaisons helped set up community centers where traditions could be practiced and taught to the younger generation. Captain David Walsh, a civil affairs officer, sat in one such community center with a group of Voxari cultural leaders. They were discussing how to preserve important artifacts and records that had been scattered during the evacuation. "We have teams that specialize in cultural preservation," David explained. "If you can tell us what is most important to your people, we can help recover and protect it. Documents, artifacts, religious items, whatever defines who you are as a people." An elderly Voxari named Thorna, who served as a keeper of historical records, looked at him with watery eyes. "You would do this? In the middle of a war, you would send people to rescue our history?" "Miss Thorna, a people without their history is like a tree without roots," David said. "You have already lost so much. We can at least try to save what makes you who you are. Just give us the locations and we will bring back what we can." Over the next week, specialized human teams entered dangerous zones to recover cultural artifacts. They pulled ancient manuscripts from burning libraries, rescued religious icons from destroyed temples, and carefully cataloged everything they found. Voxari historians worked alongside human archivists, teaching them which items held the most significance. When the first recovered artifacts were presented to the refugee community, something remarkable happened. Thousands of Voxari gathered in the central square of the temporary city, many of them crying as they saw pieces of their heritage that they thought were lost forever. Thorna held a manuscript that dated back 3,000 years, one of the founding documents of Voxari civilization, and she sobbed openly. "You saved our soul," she whispered to David. "Not just our bodies, but our soul." The story of the human intervention began to spread beyond Voxen Prime. News traveled through the Galactic Council networks, carried by traders and diplomats who heard the reports with disbelief. The Krath Empire, which had never been successfully resisted, had been pushed back by a species most had dismissed as primitive newcomers. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, representatives from dozens of species gathered for an emergency session. The Zendari representative, an ancient being who had served on the council for 2 centuries, addressed the assembly. "We must discuss the human intervention on Voxen Prime. They have violated numerous protocols by engaging in military action without council approval. They have disrupted the established order." The Voxari representative, Ambassador Khalith herself, rose to speak. She was thin and exhausted, but her voice rang clear through the chamber. "The established order left my people to die. The council debated and consulted and calculated while 6 billion of my people faced extinction. The humans did not ask for permission or approval. They simply came and helped. They lost soldiers protecting our children. They spent resources with no expectation of return. And now you dare to criticize them for violating protocols?" The chamber fell silent. It was rare for anyone to speak so bluntly to the council. A Plutheri representative spoke up, their translator rendering their clicks and whistles into galactic standard. "We understand your gratitude, Ambassador Keyleth, but you must understand the precedent this sets. If any species can simply intervene in conflicts without council oversight, it creates chaos. Then perhaps," a new voice said from the chamber entrance, "the council needs to reconsider what it considers chaos." Everyone turned to see Captain Maria Santos enter. Still wearing her dress uniform with the bandage visible beneath her sleeve, she had been called to testify about the human intervention. She walked to the speaker's platform without hesitation. "I am Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. I commanded the fleet that responded to the Voxari distress call. I am here to answer your questions." The Zendari representative leaned forward. "Captain Santos, your species engaged in a military conflict without consulting this council. Do you deny this?" "I do not deny it," Maria said calmly. "We received a distress call from a dying world. We responded. That is what decent beings do." But you had no authority to intervene in a conflict between the Krath Empire and the Voxari Coalition. Maria's eyes hardened. With respect, Representative, we needed no authority beyond basic morality. The Krath were committing genocide. The Council was doing nothing. We had the ability to help, so we did. If that violates your protocols, then your protocols are worthless. Gasps echoed through the chamber. No one spoke to the Council this way. The Zendari representative's skin color shifted to an angry purple. You are extremely bold for a representative of a species that has no standing in this galaxy. Perhaps that is exactly why we could act, Maria replied. We were not paralyzed by politics or trade agreements or ancient alliances. We just saw people who needed help. And now, because we helped, 6 billion Voxari are alive. Millions of children will grow up who would have died. An entire civilization has been preserved. If that makes us bold, then I accept that label gladly. The debate in the council chambers continued for hours, but Captain Santos had made her point. She left the chamber knowing that humanity had drawn a line in the galactic sand. They would not play by rules that allowed innocent people to die for the sake of political convenience. As she walked through the corridors of the massive council station, she was approached by representatives from smaller species, those who had felt the weight of council indifference themselves. A delegate from the Marathi Confederation, a small peaceful species, approached her nervously. Captain Santos, my people have watched what humanity did on Voxen Prime. We have borders with aggressive neighbors, and the council always tells us to negotiate and compromise. If we ever face what the Voxari faced, would humanity help us too? Maria looked at the small bird-like creature and saw genuine fear in their eyes. If you call for help and we can reach you, we will come. That is a promise. The Marathi delegate's feathers ruffled with emotion. Why? We have nothing to offer Earth. We are a poor people with little resources. Because it is right, Maria said simply. That is the only reason we need. Word of that conversation spread through the smaller species networks faster than light-speed communications. For the first time in galactic history, there was a major power that did not demand payment or political alignment for protection. Humanity was offering something that had been absent from the galaxy for centuries, genuine altruism backed by the ability to enforce it. Back on Voxen Prime, the rebuilding continued. The Krath had withdrawn their forces completely after their defeat, and now the real work began. The temporary refugee city was functioning well, but it was just that, temporary. The Voxari needed their real cities rebuilt, their infrastructure restored, their civilization brought back from the brink. Chief Engineer Michael Chen stood with Dr. Velth and a team of both human and Voxari engineers, looking at holographic projections of the capital city, Nixara. It had been the cultural heart of Voxari civilization, home to 10 million people before the invasion. Now it was a shell of rubble and burned buildings. We can rebuild it, Michael said, studying the damage assessment. But it will take years, maybe decades, if we use conventional methods. Velth nodded sadly. Our construction techniques are slow but thorough. It took us 2 centuries to build Nexara the first time. What if we combined our approaches? Michael suggested. Use human rapid construction methods for the basic infrastructure and structure. Then let Voxari craftsmen add the cultural elements and finishing touches. We provide the bones, you provide the soul. Velth considered this. It went against traditional Voxari building philosophy, which emphasized careful planning and slow execution, but traditional philosophy had not saved them from the Krath. These humans had proven their methods worked, even if they were unconventional. Show me your plan, Velth said. Over the next month, the reconstruction of Nexara became the largest construction project in the sector. Human construction ships worked alongside Voxari builders, creating a fusion of efficiency and artistry. Massive human machines cleared rubble and laid foundations in days. Then Voxari artisans would come in, adding the architectural details that made buildings uniquely Voxari, the flowing curves and organic designs that reflected their culture's connection to nature. A young Voxari architect named Saris found herself working with a human structural engineer named James Park, son of Colonel Park. They were designing a new school that would incorporate both human safety standards and Voxari educational philosophy. Your buildings are so rigid, Saris observed, looking at James's structural plans. All straight lines and right angles. Do humans not value beauty? James laughed. We value beauty differently, maybe. But look here. He modified the design, showing how the structural elements could be curved and integrated into flowing patterns while maintaining their strength. Engineering and art do not have to be separate. They can enhance each other. Saris saw the potential immediately. Together, they created a design that was both structurally sound by human standards and aesthetically pleasing by Voxari standards. The school would become a symbol of cooperation between the two species, a building that neither could have created alone. While the physical reconstruction progressed, another kind of rebuilding was happening in the refugee camps. Voxari society had been traumatized by the invasion. People had watched their world burn, had hidden in shelters waiting to die, had lost friends and family. The psychological scars ran deep. Dr. Elizabeth Chen organized mental health services that brought together human psychologists and Voxari healers. They created support groups where survivors could share their experiences and begin processing their trauma. The approach was holistic, combining human clinical psychology with Voxari traditional healing practices. In one session, Elizabeth sat with a group of Voxari adults who had lost everything in the invasion. A middle-aged male named Torin spoke, his voice hollow. "I cannot stop seeing the fires. Every time I close my eyes, I see my home burning. I see my neighbors dying. How do I move past this? How do any of us move past this?" Elizabeth leaned forward, her expression compassionate. "Torin, what you are experiencing is completely normal given what you have been through. Trauma is not a sign of weakness. It is your mind trying to process something terrible that happened. The path forward is not about forgetting. It is about integrating these experiences into your life story, without letting them define you completely." A Voxari healer named Orthus added, "In our tradition, we believe that wounds of the spirit need the same care as wounds of the body. You would not expect a broken bone to heal instantly. Your spirit is also wounded and it needs time and care to heal." "But will it heal?" Torin asked desperately. "Will any of us ever feel safe again?" "Yes," Elizabeth said with quiet confidence. "It will take time and it will not be easy, but you will heal. And you will not heal alone. Look around this room. Everyone here has survived the same darkness. You can support each other, learn from each other, and rebuild together." Over weeks and months, the support groups became communities. Survivors began helping other survivors, sharing coping strategies and offering comfort. Human mental health professionals provided clinical support, while Voxari healers offered cultural context and traditional practices. The combination proved more effective than either approach alone. Children especially needed attention. Young Voxari who had hidden in shelters, who had heard the sounds of war, who had seen things no child should see. They carried wounds that might last a lifetime if left untreated. Human and Voxari educators created special programs combining play therapy, creative expression, and gentle counseling. Lieutenant Maria Santos, recovered from her injuries, volunteered at one of these programs during her off-duty hours. She sat with a group of children who were drawing pictures of their experiences. Many drew dark, violent images of Krath soldiers and burning buildings. But slowly, over time, the pictures began to change. Colors became brighter. Images of human soldiers appeared, protecting Voxari families. Pictures of the new refugee city showed people smiling. Little Lyra, the girl who had asked Maria why humans helped, drew a picture of a human and Voxari holding hands beneath a bright sun. She showed it to Maria proudly. "This is you and me," Lyra explained. "After you helped us." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. This was why they had come. This was why soldiers had died and resources had been spent. For moments like this where a child could envision a future bright enough to draw with the sun. In the Military Command Center, Major General Susan Martinez reviewed reports from across the planet. The Krath had not returned, deterred by their defeat and by the continued presence of human warships in orbit. Evacuation operations had saved over 5.9 billion civilians. The temporary cities were functioning well. Reconstruction was ahead of schedule. By every metric, the mission was a success. But Susan knew the real test was still to come. Eventually, humanity would have to leave. The fleet could not stay in orbit forever. When that day came, would the Voxari be able to defend themselves? Would the galaxy have changed enough to protect them? She called a meeting with Ambassador Keyleth and the surviving Voxari military commanders. When they gathered in her conference room, Susan laid out maps and tactical displays. "Ambassador Generals, we need to talk about what happens when we leave," Susan said bluntly. "Our mission was to stop the Krath invasion and help your people rebuild. We have done that. But we cannot stay forever. You need to be able to defend yourselves. General Korath, the highest-ranking surviving Voxari military officer, nodded grimly. Our forces were destroyed. Our ships are debris. Our soldiers are dead or wounded. It would take us a decade to rebuild our military to previous strength, and that strength was clearly insufficient. Then we need a different approach, Susan said. She brought up new designs on the display. These are plans for upgraded defense systems incorporating both human and Voxari technology. Stronger shields, better weapons, improved training protocols. We are willing to help you build and implement them. We will also provide training for your new recruits, teaching them the tactics and strategies that stop the Krath. Ambassador Keyleth studied the plans. This would make our military one of the most powerful in the region. Marcus watched the exercise with approval. Good work, Chorus. You kept your head under pressure and used your resources effectively. That is exactly what we taught you. Chorus looked at his human instructor with respect. Sergeant Cole, why do you spend so much time teaching us? Your mission is complete. You could go home. Marcus thought about that question carefully before answering. Chorus, my people learned something important in our own history. Freedom and safety are not gifts that someone gives you once and you keep forever. They are things you have to defend, every generation. We can protect you today, but tomorrow you need to protect yourselves and maybe even protect others. We are teaching you so that when we leave you will be ready, and so that maybe someday, when someone else needs help like you did, you will be the ones who can provide it. That conversation reflected a larger philosophy that guided human involvement on Voxan Prime. They were not trying to create dependency. They were trying to empower the Voxari to stand on their own feet. Every human expert who worked on rebuilding paired with a Voxari counterpart teaching them skills and knowledge. Every system installed came with full documentation and training on maintenance and repair. Dr. Velth, who had become close friends with engineer Michael Chen during the shield reconstruction, expressed concern about this approach one evening as they shared a meal in the engineering section. Michael, you humans are giving us everything. Advanced technology, military training, construction techniques. Are you not worried we might become a threat someday? Or that we might share these secrets with others? Michael smiled and took a sip of the Voxari tea he had learned to enjoy. Velth, humanity's strength does not come from keeping secrets or hoarding technology. It comes from our principles and our willingness to act on them. If we only helped people who could never become a threat, we would be acting out of fear, not compassion. We trust you because you have shown yourselves to be good people, and if you share what we have taught you with others who need it, that just makes the galaxy a better place. Velth was quiet for a moment, absorbing this perspective. It was so different from how the Galactic Council operated, where every species guarded their advantages jealously. Your species is very strange, Michael Chen, but I think the galaxy needs your kind of strangeness. As the year mark approached since the human intervention, preparations began for a ceremony to commemorate the event. The Voxari wanted to honor the humans who had saved their civilization, especially the soldiers who had died in battle. A memorial was constructed in the center of the rebuilt capital city, Nexara. It featured the names of all 147 human soldiers who had fallen defending Voxan Prime, carved in both human and Voxari script. On the day of the dedication, thousands of Voxari gathered in the plaza surrounding the memorial. Human personnel who had served on Voxan Prime stood in formation, many wearing their dress uniforms decorated with Voxari medals of honor. Ambassador Keyleth stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd that represented a people brought back from the edge of extinction. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying across the silent plaza, we were dying. Our world burned. Our people fled. Our allies abandoned us. We sent out a call for help, expecting only refugee ships if anything came at all. Instead, humanity sent us officers who led our defense. They sent us builders who raised new cities from rubble. They sent us warplanes that drove back an enemy we thought invincible. But most importantly, they sent us hope. She paused, gesturing to the memorial behind her. These names represent more than soldiers who died in battle. They represent a choice to risk everything for people they had never met, for a cause that was not theirs, for no reward except the knowledge that they did what was right. They are heroes in the truest sense of the word. Captain Maria Santos stood at attention with her crew, fighting back emotion as each name was read aloud. She thought about Lieutenant Davidson, who had taken a plasma blast meant for a group of civilian children. About Corporal Zhang, who had held a defensive position alone for 20 minutes to buy time for an evacuation. About so many others who would never see Earth again. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and began celebrations of remembrance and renewal, Maria found herself approached by Oren, the teacher who had been rescued from that first shelter. She was accompanied by all 32 children she had protected during those dark days. "Captain Santos," Oren said, "these children wanted to show you something." The children had created a mural, painted on a large canvas. It depicted the moment when human soldiers had arrived at their shelter, showing Sergeant Cole reaching out his hand to help them to safety. But the background of the painting showed something more, a vision of humans and Voxari working together, building, teaching, protecting. It was their vision of the future. "This is beautiful," Maria said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the children. "You have all grown so much." Little Lyra stepped forward, no longer quite so little. A year had changed her from a frightened child into a confident young person. "Captain Maria, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to help people like you helped us." Maria smiled through her tears. "Then you will be carrying on what we started here. And that is the greatest honor you could give us." 2 years after the invasion, the day finally came for the bulk of human forces to depart Voxen Prime. The planet had been transformed. Cities had been rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful than before. The defense grid was operational and more powerful than ever. The new Voxari military was trained, equipped, and ready. The time had come for the Voxari to stand on their own. At the spaceport, thousands of Voxari gathered to see off the departing humans. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with gratitude and sadness in equal measure. Ambassador Kalith stood with Captain Maria Santos, looking at the ships that would carry the expeditionary force back to human space. "I do not know how to properly thank you," Keyleth said quietly. "My people owe humanity a debt we can never fully repay." Maria shook her head firmly. "You owe us nothing, Ambassador. What we did freely. But if you want to honor what happened here, then pay it forward. When someone else needs help, remember how you felt when the galaxy abandoned you. Be the ones who answer the call." Kalith nodded slowly, understanding the weight of that request. "We will. I promise you we will." The human personnel began boarding their ships, saying goodbye to Voxari friends and colleagues they had worked alongside for 2 years. Chief Engineer Michael Chen embraced Dr. Velth, both of them reluctant to part after becoming close friends. "You have my contact information," Michael said. "If you run into any engineering problems you cannot solve, call me. Anytime, day or night by Earth standard." Velth's skin shifted to a warm orange color indicating affection. "And you must return someday. I want to show you the new university we are building. It will have a department of human-inspired engineering, teaching the principles you showed us." Across the spaceport, similar scenes played out. Soldiers hugged Voxari children they had helped rescue. Doctors exchanged information with their Voxari counterparts. Construction workers took holograms with the Voxari builders they had trained. Bonds had been forged that would last lifetimes. Sergeant Marcus Cole found Chorus, who was now a junior officer in the new Voxari military. They clasped arms in the traditional Voxari gesture of respect between warriors. "Remember your training," Marcus said. "Stay flexible, stay alert, and protect your people." "I will, Sergeant," Chorus replied. "And I will teach others what you taught me. Your legacy will continue here." As the last humans boarded their ships, the Voxari crowds began to sing. It was a traditional song of farewell and blessing, its melody haunting and beautiful. The humans paused on the ramps of their ships, listening to thousands of voices raised in harmony. Many had tears streaming down their faces. The ships lifted off, rising into the sky in perfect formation. On the ground, the Voxari watched until the last ship disappeared from view. The humans were gone, but they had left behind more than just rebuilt cities and trained soldiers. They had left behind a changed civilization. The impact of humanity's intervention rippled across the galaxy, in ways both expected and unexpected. The Krath Empire, humiliated by their defeat, became notably more cautious about selecting targets for conquest. They began avoiding worlds that had any connection to humanity, afraid of triggering another intervention. Other aggressive species took note. The Drixari horde, which had been eyeing several weak border worlds for invasion, suddenly found reasons to pursue diplomatic solutions instead. The mere possibility of human intervention changed the calculus of aggression across multiple sectors. But the most profound changes happened among the peaceful species who had lived under the threat of stronger neighbors. Inspired by the Voxari example, they began reaching out to each other, forming mutual defense pacts and cooperation agreements. If the Galactic Council would not protect them, they would protect each other. The Marathi Confederation, whose delegate had spoken with Captain Santos, initiated the creation of what became known as the Alliance of Free Worlds. It was a defensive pact among smaller species who committed to coming to each other's aid in times of crisis. The Voxari were founding members, and they brought with them the military knowledge and technology humans had shared. Within 5 years, the alliance included 23 species and commanded respect, even from larger powers. Humanity maintained friendly relations with all alliance members, but they refused to join formally. As the human ambassador to the Galactic Council explained, "We do not want to be seen as your protectors or leaders. We want you to be your own protectors and leaders. We are your friends and allies, ready to help when needed, but this is your organization and your future." This approach baffled many traditional powers in the galaxy. The Zendari, in particular, could not understand why humanity would refuse a position of authority over species that were clearly indebted to them. They watched as humans continued to respond to distress calls from across the galaxy, providing aid and assistance without demanding payment or political concessions. 3 years after Voxan Prime, a famine struck the agricultural world of Planara. The Galactic Council debated food aid packages and loan terms. Humanity simply showed up with cargo ships full of supplies and agricultural experts who taught the Planarans how to prevent future famines. They left without asking for anything in return. 5 years after Voxan Prime, a plague broke out on the industrial world of Carthex. The Council quarantined the system and discussed containment protocols. Human medical ships arrived within days, bringing doctors, equipment, and experimental treatments. They worked around the clock until the plague was contained and cured. Again, they asked for nothing in return. The pattern repeated across dozens of worlds and situations. Humanity became known as the species that helped without strings attached, that valued life above profit, that chose action over debate. It made them beloved among ordinary citizens across the galaxy, but created tension with established powers who saw their behavior as disruptive to the traditional order. In the Galactic Council chambers, the debate about humanity's role continued for years. Some called them dangerous idealists who would destabilize centuries of careful balance. Others argued they were naive fools who would eventually be taken advantage of. But a growing number, particularly representatives from smaller species, began calling them something else entirely. Hope. Ambassador Kilith, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates in the Council, addressed the Assembly during one particularly heated debate about human interventionism. "You call them dangerous," she said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "You call them naive. You say they disrupt the established order. But I ask you this. What good is an established order that allows genocide? What value is stability if it means innocent people die while we debate? Humanity has shown us that there is another way. A way where helping others is not a transaction but a duty, where strength is used to protect the weak rather than exploit them. Yes, they are disruptive. They disrupt cruelty. They disrupt indifference. They disrupt the idea that we should accept injustice because it is convenient, and I, for one, am grateful for that disruption." Her words resonated with many, but they also hardened opposition from those who benefited from the old ways. The galaxy was changing, and change always created resistance. On Earth, the Expeditionary Force personnel who had served on Voxan Prime returned to a hero's welcome. But many of them struggled with the transition back to normal life. They had seen things, done things, and formed bonds that could not easily be explained to those who had not been there. Captain Maria Santos, promoted to Admiral after Voxan Prime, found herself in charge of expanding humanity's rapid response capabilities. She worked tirelessly to ensure that when the next call for help came, humanity would be ready. But she also made time to stay in contact with the Voxari friends she had made. One evening, she received a call from Lyra, the child she had read stories to in the refugee camp. Lyra was now a teenager, articulate and confident. "Admiral Santos," Lyra said, smiling from the viewscreen, "I wanted you to be the first to know. I have been accepted into the Voxari Military Academy. I am going to become an officer, like you." Maria felt a surge of pride. That is wonderful, Lyra. You are going to do great things. I wanted to thank you, Lyra continued, for everything you did. For saving us, yes, but more than that. For showing me what it means to serve something larger than yourself. For teaching me that one person can make a difference. I am going to spend my life trying to live up to the example you set. After the call ended, Maria sat in her office, staring at the medals and commendations on her wall. They meant little compared to that conversation. This was the true legacy of Voxen Prime, not the battles won or cities rebuilt, but the lives touched and the future generations inspired to carry forward the ideals of service and sacrifice. Back on Voxen Prime, the anniversary of the invasion had become a dual holiday. It was a day of remembrance for those lost, but also a celebration of survival and renewal. In schools across the planet, children learned about the dark days when their world nearly died and about the humans who came when no one else would. Oren, the teacher who had protected her students in that shelter, had written a children's book about the experience. It was called The Day Hope Arrived and had become required reading in Voxari schools.